Hi, I'm Lillian. Welcome back to my channel, Ink and Pages. Today I'm going to be discussing musing, if you will, upon the subject of what I could read in 2025. I'm not going to call these goals because they're not reading goals, but they are 2025 reading possibilities. So for starters, I could begin by saying, oh, I want to read all of the books on my physical TBR. Upon last count, I think this number is 57. So I could make a TBR jar or set myself this challenge of reading every single book I own that I have not yet read. There are lots of people who've done this challenge and have documented it, but I would say for me, I found particular enjoyment and inspiration for this from Zoe on TikTok, who goes by the handle NYC Book Ho. I've really loved her videos where she's reading down her entire physical TBR. I think she's done it twice now, and I love those videos, and I would love to be someone who does that. The problem for me is that I'm such a mood reader. I really cannot force myself to read a book if I'm just not in the mood for it, and that is why I own books and have had them for many years and still haven't read them yet. But also for me, those 57 books include ones that are non-fiction, and they include all of my mythology books that I haven't read. So I'm really interested in folklore and mythology, and I like to buy books on that subject. And I view that part of my shelves as kind of like a reference library. So it's not a book for me to sit down and just immediately read it like I would a novel. It is just for me to own just in case I become interested in that topic or need to look something up in that book. But so is it fair for me to include that in my 57 books? I would say maybe not if I'm going to do a reading challenge out of them, which is why I'm not saying it's a goal to read all 57 of these books. It's merely a reading possibility. So next, in terms of challenges, there are so many out there, different reading challenges people have invented, but the one I'm probably the most invested in one day saying I've completed is the Buzzwordathon. This is a reading challenge created by Kayla on her channel Books and Lala. And the main idea for this is that there is a prompt per month. So you can do one per month, or you can kind of mix them up and do them throughout the year. It's very easy breezy in that way, which I like. But you have to read a book that has a specific word in its title. Sometimes it's very prescribed, like you have to find the word flame in a book title, and sometimes the prompt is more like a theme of words, so like fire words. So it could be flame, it could be fire, it could be burn, anything like that. So the 2025 prompts have been announced for this challenge, and I thought it would be fun to just look at my TBR and see if I was really going to commit to this and pick out 12 books to fulfill this challenge, what would they be? So for January, the prompt is truth or lies. I have nothing on my TBR which would fulfill this, so I would have to reread The Lies of Locke Lamora. And then this would work well because the February prompt is like water related words. So then I could read the sequel, which is Red Seas Under Red Skies, and it would work perfectly. For March, the prompt is the word thing. So I could pick up another sequel, which would be Life, the Universe and Everything, which is the third book in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. And then for April, the prompt is any kind of animal in the book title. So I thought maybe, is that a fish in your ear, which is a linguistics book, which I've owned for I think over 10 years at this point and have not read. For May, the prompt is two or two. Slightly scraping the barrel here, but I think I would read my book on Egyptian myths because the subtitle is like the guide to the gods and legends or something like that. And then for June, I don't have anything for this prompt. It's memory words, and I've got nothing. And actually for July, I've got nothing as well. It's punctuation. I guess I could say there's a semicolon in the Egyptian book, but that seems too much like scraping the barrel. So potentially I would definitely have to get a new book to fulfill this prompt. The one I'm thinking of is this murder mystery called, I think, Hell and Death. I don't know how you pronounce it, but that has a lovely ampersand in the middle, so would work perfectly. For August, the word is with, so I'm thinking I would have to reread something for this. I'm thinking Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me, which I read years ago and actually would quite like to reread to see if I still like it. And then for September, the prompt is events. So this would have to be another reread. I'm thinking The Night Circus, which again, I read years ago. This one actually I think I read it in 2012. I'm pretty sure I remember reading this on the train to a university open day on my way to Bangor when I was still at school. So it's been ages, but I love this book, so I'd actually love to reread it. For October, the theme is violent words of any kind. So again, I've got nothing on my TBR that would fulfill this, like nothing out of the 57 books has a violent word in the title somehow. So I'm thinking I would again pick up a new book, and I'm thinking it would be The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. I've read 2 of his books before. First one didn't really love, second one really did. So it could be like a best of 3 situation. For November, the prompt is Never. Again, I got nothing for this. But I think there's a thriller book called They Never Learn, which I remember sounded interesting. And then for December, the prompt is something alliterative. So I thought maybe Wintering, because it's winter in the title, so it'd be a perfect December read, I hope. But the subtitle for this is like The Power of Rest and Retreat in Trying Times, or something like that. So there's alliteration in there, so that could work. This year, there is also a secondary version of the Buzzwordathon, which is all about elements on the book covers. So again, there are 12 prompts, which I thought it would be fun to look at and see if I can fit my TBR in there. And this time I actually did a bit better without having to like rely on new books. So the prompt for January is patterns. So a book with some kind of pattern on the front cover. Not many of mine filled this requirement, but I actually think my copy of the Mabinogion does. This is from my mythology and folklore shelf, and it's all about Welsh myths. Sounds very cool. For February, the prompt is skyline. So this doesn't necessarily have to be like a city skyline, but it could also be a landscape. So I'm thinking I would choose Across the Greengrass Fields by Shauna Maguire. Then for March, the prompt is books. So like a picture of a book on another book's cover. This is the only one I could not fulfill from my current TBR. But I'm thinking potentially an Emily Henry book, like Beach Read, because her books often reference reading or books in the title or on the cover. And so that is what I would do for this. For April, it's animals again. So I'm thinking my edition of the Greek myths, which has this gorgeous like swan illustration on the front cover. And then for May, the prompt is eyes. This one was harder to find, but I think I would go with Disfigured for this because it does have an eye on the cover. For June, you have to have some kind of celestial body on the cover. So I would go with Broken Stars, which also has stars on the cover as well as in the title. And then for July, you have to have some kind of technology. This one was harder, and I think I'm slightly scraping the barrel, but I'm going to go with Black Swan Green because this has a record on the front cover, which implies the existence of a record player, which is a kind of technology. For August, the theme is transport, so I'd go with another David Mitchell book, this time The Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet, because it has a ship on it. For September, you have to have a book with foliage on, so I'm thinking On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. And then October, you have to have a weapon. So I would go to my mythology and folklore shelf again, and I would probably pick the Penguin Book of Norse Myths. For November, you've got to have some kind of food or drink. So I would go with the Little Book of Huga because it has a teapot and some teacups on. And then finally for December, you have to have a book that is monochromatic. So not necessarily like black and white, but I think it also counts if you have a book which is predominantly just one color. So I would choose my copy of the Aeneid. Okay, well, I have 2. I'd choose this version of the Aeneid, which I own, which is this shocking orange color, which is kind of jokes, and I'm a little bit obsessed with it. So another reading challenge I'm thinking about is more like geography based. So I have a spread in my reading journal for this year, which is called Reading Around the World. And there's a space for 6 different books from 6 different continents, obviously excluding Antarctica. So my dream, ideally, would be to read a book set in each continent from an author from that continent. And looking at my TBR, I can only fulfill 4 of these. So Europe is pretty easy. I'd say most of my books take place there. So we could potentially do Black Swan Green again. But for North America, I was thinking maybe Firekeeper's Daughter, which I actually did start to read a couple of years ago. I think I got like 50 or 70 pages in and then wasn't really vibing with it. But I still have it because this book physically is such a like imposing part of my TBR shelf. It's this huge thick paperback book with a gorgeous cover, let's not deny it. So even though I wasn't really loving it, I would like to get to it at some point this year. Even if it turns out I don't love it and it's not for me, I would like to try. For Africa and Asia, I also don't have much to choose from on my current TBR, so I think I would go with the Egyptian Myths book and then Broken Stars again. And for South America and Oceania, I got nothing on my current TBR. I would have to actually do some research and get a new book for for each of these, but I guess that's kind of the point, isn't it? This challenge, I think, is probably designed to make me step out of my comfort zone and read books I never would have heard of otherwise. So even though this literally only involves reading 6 books, the fact that I've only got 4 that I can currently fulfill should maybe be telling me something about my TBR. Okay, this next possibility I'm actually really hyped about, and I'm very proud of this idea. So it's to do with going to bookshops in London, but specifically bookshops which are in South London. Because when people talk about bookshops in London, they always recommend like, oh, the big foils by Tottenham Court Road, or oh, the flagship Waterstones at Piccadilly, which is the biggest bookshop in Europe, or that one where it's a bookshop on a boat in a canal somewhere near King's Cross. Everyone always talks about those. Where I want to ask is the love for the other 2 branches of foils, which are both south of the river. One is on South Bank and one is a stone's throw away inside Waterloo Station. Where's the love for those? And everyone's talking about Piccadilly Waterstones. What about the Waterstones in Bromley, where it's like around the walkway and shoppers are walking on the ground floor and you're in this book atrium above them? That's cool. That's great. That's my branch of Waterstones I would always go to, and it's gorgeous. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I like focused on those? I don't know, this could be a vlog series potentially. Probably not, because I don't really do those, but it would be interesting, and I think it would be cool. And so I've made myself a list on Google Maps of all the bookshops I could find south of the river. They had to be south of the river. I don't care that like some postcodes in Victoria have an S in the postcode. No, you're above the river. You don't count. But this list included like branches of big things like Waterstones and the works. Like it's got all of those on. And I also tried to get every single independent bookshop I could as well. Okay, well, I didn't include, there was like 2 I found which were just like kids books, and I was like, no, not interested in those. So apart from those, but I tried to get every single bookshop I could find onto this list. And I also tried to add all the little free libraries as well, even though the website for this I would say is not 100% reliable, because I could think of 2 little free libraries within walking distance of my house, neither of which are on the official website. So I know there must be loads out there that the website isn't directing me to. And I also added on some actual like libraries just in my borough, because that's the one I have a library card to. But I made this big list for myself, and I look at it every now and then and dream about the day which I could actually go to some of these and make a point of going to different parts of London which I've not really been to very much before, and just like doing bookish related things there. And I think that could be so fun. The next reading possibility I have is to read the rainbow. So that would be like 12 books for 12 different colours. So going off my TBR, red could be Dark Matter, another book I've owned for years and haven't read. This is a mainstay of my TBR at this point. For orange, we could have that gorgeous luminescent version of the Aeneid again. For yellow, it could maybe be Through the Language Glass, another book I've owned for ages. Green, it could be Disfigured. Turquoise could be The Egyptian Myths again, and blue could be A Thousand Ships. Purple is the only colour I don't have a book for, but I thought maybe for this I could choose Don't Want You Like a Best Friend, which I think is a Regency romance with a Taylor Swift lyric as the title and a suitable purple cover. I also don't really own a pink book, but I thought potentially volume 7 of Monstrous, the graphic novel series. It's kind of pink-ish, so it could kind of work for this one. For a white book, I could use the Odyssey. I've got 2 different versions of this, but I could use the Emily Wilson translation. And then for grey, I was thinking I could do Our Dark Duet. Brown could be this English fairy tales book I have, and then black could be Arcadia, which is another book I've owned for years and haven't got to yet. Next reading possibility for me could be to work on the series I am reading and try and finish off a couple of them. Last I checked, I am currently reading 17 series. 2 of them I'm up to date with. So the Song of Ice and Fire and ACOTAR, I've read all the books that are currently out. I'm also somehow in the middle of 3 V.E. Schwab series, and I only had the last book to read in each of these instances. So those series are A Dark Shade of Magic, Monsters of Verity, and The Villain's Duology. Although technically, I think that's about to become a trilogy. We're ignoring book 3 for now. But yeah, I only have the last one of each of these to read. That's embarrassing for me. I've also got the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series by Douglas Adams. I own all 5 and I've read the first 2. I've read the first book of the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers and have 3 more to read. And next is the Odyssey graphic novel series. There's only 2 of these. I've read the first one. never got around to volume 2. Next is the Themis Files, which is a sci-fi trilogy by Sylvain Neuvel. I've got the first one. Well, I've read the first one. I've got the second one. Have yet to read that. There's also the Saga graphic novel series by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. I think now like the 12th volume has just been released, and I've read the first 6. And the other 2 graphic novel series I am reading are Monstrous, which is one of my favourite series of all time, actually. Shout out to Monstrous again. I think there's 8 or 9 volumes now. I've read the first 6 and I also own volume 7 on my TBR. And then there's also the Rat Queens series. This has had, I think, multiple different authors and illustrators. I think there's 8 volumes in total. I've read and got the first 3. And then the 3rd volume ended on like this big thing, this like cliffhangery ending. And then I heard that the 4th volume, because there were all these like creative changes behind the scenes, it didn't address that cliffhanger. So I think it just continued like it never happened, or like the story just picks up again and then you find out what happened in that situation in like flashbacks. And I wasn't interested in that, but I kind of am, and I kind of am interested in continuing this series. But this is probably the one that I'm the most wary of, and I think has the highest potential to disappoint me. The next series I'm in the middle of is the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch. I think there's 4 books out for this. I've only read the first one. I started reading Red Seas Under Red Skies now 2 years ago, and I did get like 150 pages in, and then it was just like too complex for like a brainless summer read, so I stopped. But I did really enjoy the first book. I think at this point I would have to reread that first book before continuing on. Next is the Wayward Children series by Shauna Maguire. I think the 10th book is about to be released and I have read the first 5. There's also the Singing Hills cycle by Neve Vo. I've read the first 3 of those and I think there's 5 out. And finally is the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. I think there's 7 or 8 books in this series and I've read the first one. I also finally got my own copy of the first book in this series for Christmas last year. And the final reading possibility I could try for 2025 is to listen to more audiobooks while doing jigsaw puzzles. I am big into puzzles, love them. And I've got quite a few like bookish related ones, which I've done some videos on. I'm definitely planning on doing more this year. But I have had a lot of success. I think like the 2 times I think it's twice I've done this, where I've done a puzzle, like a bookish puzzle, and then listened to the audiobook related to that. So I have a Dracula puzzle, which I love. And then when I did it for the first or second time, actually, I can't remember, I listened to an audiobook of Dracula and it was so great. It was a fantastic experience. And then last year I did a puzzle about the Bronte sisters and I listened to the audiobook of Wuthering Heights. And again, it was a great time. So I was like, clearly this is a pattern I'm enjoying. How can I continue this? So I thought I could maybe do the Bronte puzzle again, because I've only done it once so far, and I could listen to another audiobook of theirs. I'm thinking Jane Eyre, because I have read that before, read it at school. Actually, I didn't read it for school, but I read it while I was a teenager at school and kind of liked it. And I think it would just elevate the experience to have even more fun because I'd be doing a puzzle while listening to it. And then for Christmas, I got a puzzle of the Odyssey, which I'm very excited to do. And so my plan for this is to listen to the audiobook. So I've got 2 copies of the Odyssey. The first one is the Robert Fagles translation, which is the one I originally read at uni years ago. And I listened to the audiobook of this the first time round because it was on YouTube and it's read by Ian McKellen and it was just like a great time. But I'm thinking I would like to sort of tandem read that translation and also the Emily Wilson translation, all while doing the puzzle, and that could just be like a really fun time for me. So if I get to do that, I think that's going to be just a very fun experience for me. And then some other possibilities I've come up with. I don't own this puzzle, but I know there's one out there called like The World of Frankenstein. So I could do that while listening to the Frankenstein audiobook. And then I know there's another Jane Austen puzzle. I think it's like a Gibson's Book Club Jane Austen puzzle. So I could do that while listening to one of her audiobooks. I've never actually read a Jane Austen book. I've watched so many adaptations of them, but never actually read a book of hers. So I'm thinking I could start with the classic Pride and Prejudice. And then my final idea for this was there are a couple of like Lord of the Rings puzzles out there I have my eye on. To be honest, there's not many of them. A lot of the Lord of the Rings puzzles I've seen are like from the films, and I don't like doing puzzles of photos. I like illustrations and that kind of thing. But there's one, well, there's a couple, but there's one I've got my eye on, which is like a map of Middle Earth. So I'm thinking I could do that puzzle while listening to the audiobook of The Silmarillion, and that could be a fun time. So yeah, I'm very excited about a lot of these 2025 reading possibilities. We'll see how many I actually do, but my aim for this year is just to have more fun while reading. Last year I finished 13 books, so it was a lower reading year for me compared to others, but like, that's fine. I've had low reading years before and I've come back stronger reading more books the next year. But that's not my aim. My aim is to just continue to have a good time while reading. And these possibilities could be my way to that. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.